So I'm going to open by resetting that bar a little lower than that. I am really interested in how organizations use technology, how they organize themselves to affect change to technology, how they prioritize what they do and don't do, and again, just resetting the bar here, all I'd like to do is share some stories from my experiences and relate them to what you all are probably living through in your organizations today. I started in travel in '99 or 2000, 24 years ago, at Priceline. So for folks that aren't US based, I realize it's most of the room, a little history around Priceline was it was one or two of the first online travel companies at the birth of the internet, right around the internet bubble. And Priceline was unique in that it was selling air tickets. Now today everyone knows Priceline, by the way, as Booking.com. And they do a lot of business in hotel rooms. They don't give a damn about airline tickets anymore. All the money is in the hotels for them. But it started as an air retailer. And it was a reverse auction. So you'd go to the website and you'd say, I want to go from New York to Florida and I want to pay $100. You did not know what the carrier was. You didn't know what the itinerary was. Almost every transaction was a disruption to a customer, really. So my role was building customer service systems. So this was near and dear to me. The contact rate, the post-transaction contact rate at Priceline when it launched was 70%. 7 out of 10 internet buyers would call the company, and the most common issue, who can guess? I didn't know I was going to have a 3-hour layover in Detroit. I've got to get to Florida. But sir, this is a non-refundable ticket. That was the deal. So we spent better part of 2-3 years simultaneously dealing with explosive volume growth and automating call center transactions and modifying the product to reset the customer's expectations so that, bring that call center traffic down. But over the course of 3 years, we built out a dozen call centers around the globe. We had upwards of 1,500 simultaneous seats in the call centers, servicing customers. And as an OTA, you don't have to fly it. You just got to sell it. It should be the easy part. But that was really my introduction into the exciting and perilous industry of travel. I made my way from Priceline to Spirit Airlines right around the time that Spirit was rebranding itself in the US as an ultra low-cost carrier. The management team was all ex-US Air guys. They were all new to the organization. I was hired in as CIO with a singular mandate. We have a homegrown reservation system. It's not meeting our needs. What do we do? Go sort out whether we should buy a replacement, take the development in-house and embrace it, or just continue down this path. This theme of buy versus build is something that I've heard here over the last day and something that I have lived over the last 20 years, so I thought I'd spend a little time talking about this. Right around the time that we were digging into that decision, what do we do about this? By the way, the reservation system was unfortunately called the Spirit Airlines Reservation System. The acronym was SARS. So we rebranded it. Became TASAR, the Technically Advanced Spirit Airlines Reservation System. But right around the time we were digging into what do we do around this, Spirit got new investment. Bill Franke, actually, which was an industry low-cost carrier guy. Bill came in and said, no. All of my carriers run Navitaire, and you will run Navitaire. So originally Navitaire had a product called Open Skies. How many Navitaire customers are here? Just show of hands. Does anyone remember Open Skies? This goes back, pre-2005, I think. Open Skies ran on HP hardware. This is all pre-Intel, essentially. It ran on proprietary HP machines that were end of life. So Navitaire had to do something about this. They rushed into the build of what is now New Skies. And of course, their sales team never stopped selling reservation systems, but they started pushing all their customers to this new platform. Spirit was one of 3 carriers that was simultaneously going live on a brand new platform. They had 225 man-years into development when they launched it. That was probably half of what they needed for a minimum viable product. And Spirit was going live at the same time that I think it was Ryan and somebody in South America was going live. And we took 13 different builds from them over the course of a year, each time dropping the build into an integration environment, having the operation and commercial teams participate in regression testing, only to have the business teams say, "There's showstoppers, we can't go live, this isn't good enough, go back to the drawing board." So we go back to Navitaire, we'd get another build, we'd repeat that process. Navitaire was doing this simultaneously with 3 carriers. So they finally, now remember these are common reservation systems. Navitaire made the decision and branched the code and put each one of us on our own system to try to get through this process. And so that really set this path. The decision of buy versus build was taken from me. And I went down the road of buy. And I'm sure you've all seen this. Airlines that run their own products, they build things that are custom to them. One of the most fun things we did at Spirit was, it was the only time I've seen a product bug turn into, a technology bug turn into a product feature. Ultra low-cost carriers love to stimulate demand on a website with low fares. So on Tuesday, you drop a handful of, in the United States, to be DOT compliant, I think you need 10% of the inventory at the advertised price. So you drop a few seats out there for really low fares. Spirit was focused on this $9 fare price. And Tuesday night, the website would fall over because everyone came to the website and started hunting for those fares. So the chief commercial officer at the time was Barry Biffle. He's now running Frontier. Barry said, "I've got an idea. Let's turn this into a cover charge and make some money off of it." If the website can't hit. Now, it's funny because today there'd be a number of ways that you could fair cash, you'd fix that problem. But at the time, it was an insurmountable issue for us. This is while we were still in the old system, in the middle of the Navitaire implementation. So he said, "Let's build a cover charge. You'll have to pay $5 to get onto the website to find the fares." And I said, "Well, if we're going to build it, let's not just use it once." And this turned into the $9 Fare Club at Spirit, which I think they're still running. It was generating tens of millions of dollars in recurring revenue because the name is awesome, the $9 Fare Club. It costs $39 a year to join the $9 Fare Club. But it gave you early access to those fares, and it solved the problem of the res system can't handle the volume. But it was just one of so many things that, how do we replicate that in the Navitaire environment? And it was a frustrating experience that ultimately cost me my job at Spirit. And that's typically, res system migrations tend to be career-defining moments for CIOs for that reason. But I look back on it now and think, well, that process, as frustrating as it was exactly right. The business folks were in control of the backlog and said, "This isn't good enough. Go back and do it again." And, the unique part was that we had a chairman who was familiar with all the capabilities of open skies. And he didn't understand that New Skies was not open skies. He just knew that his Spirit team couldn't get Navitaire up and running like all his other carriers did. So I took all of that baggage with me and went to Allegiant. And Allegiant was a completely different animal. Allegiant's founder, a guy by the name of Maury Gallagher, he's a dear, sweet guy. He founded ValueJet before Allegiant. And he was a technology zealot. He was convinced that owning his own technology was key to his success. And we had a monolithic system. When I say monolithic, I used to describe it to the investment community as that like all-in-one stereo system you had when you were young. There were no RCA plugs. You didn't have to worry about the cassette deck interfacing with the tuner. It was all one box. It was all kind of a piece of shit, but it was all one box and it all worked together and you didn't have those interoperability problems. It had everything from, selling inventory and sales, aircraft maintenance, general ledger, crew scheduling, payroll, all in one system. We made a change to the calendar on the website one day and broke crew scheduling because the calendar was an include file that was used in both applications. But we spent, 8 years dissecting that monolithic system and modernizing it and turning it into a, sort of modern API-based e-commerce platform. And we fought our way through all of those build versus buy decisions, one module at a time. Now, we would plead with Maury, like, why are we building a general ledger? The general ledger has not changed since the abacus was invented. There's debits, there's credits, everybody does the same shit. Why are we building this? Because I want to own everything. Aircraft maintenance was the straw that really broke that pattern. We had a team of 12 BAs in IT trying to define a maintenance system. For maintenance guys that could not define a maintenance system, they just wanted to work in aircraft. They didn't want to be product owners. And we were $10 million into it before we said, both sides, IT and aircraft maintenance, said, no, we don't want to do this. Let's buy. They finally did after I left and moved back to the East Coast and got my kids out of Vegas. But they finally got off that maintenance system. But that process of like, we need to own all of this. Well, these things have profound impacts on how an organization thinks and runs. Maury used to tell me, the business folks don't know what they need. You know what they need. Go build it for them and tell them how to use it. They did not have a seat at the table. They didn't own the backlog for anything. Now, Allegiant just went through a Navitaire implementation that, even kindly was not a successful Navitaire implementation. The IT folks said, we got this covered. Business folks, you don't need to be in the room. We're going to launch on time. We're going to launch same functionality. Then we'll talk. Well, they were late and they lost a whole bunch of stuff. And the IT team said, oh, quick follow-ons. We'll get to that. We'll get to that really quick. And they will be, now since then, CIO has left. Chief Marketing Officer has left. Like I said, these things tend to be career-defining moments for these folks. And Allegiant will probably be 2 years before they recover to where they were before that migration. And these themes, Priceline was 24 years ago. I was at Spirit in 2006 to 10. I feel like these patterns have not changed. There's talk here around buy versus build. I talk to airlines, management teams in the US all the time, and they're still wrestling with these same issues. How do I organize myself for this changing mix of buy versus build? And by the way, the pattern or the direction of buy versus build isn't consistent either. So Allegiant now, the pendulum has swung. They bought a maintenance system. They bought Navitaire. I know another carrier in the US that is planning on insourcing a bunch of those things now. And they're looking at how do we organize ourselves? Where do the product managers sit? Are they IT people? Are the business people embedded with the developers? Well, what if it's not a development team in-house because I bought the product? How do we organize ourselves to do this work? And my feeling on this is there are no prescriptive answers to these issues. It's every organization is different, the needs are different, the history, the DNA of the company is different. You've got to fight through these issues. But I feel like I know this is a room not of IT folks primarily, but business folks that are trying to use technology to solve a problem. You don't want to wait for the IT team to figure out how they need to be organized to do what you want them to do. You just want to solve the problem. So some takeaways I feel like that apply to where we are today. It's so important to own your own stuff, to know how your processes work, how your systems work, to be in control of that backlog, to have a seat at the table when decisions get made around what do we build now, what do we put off. That prioritization process, portfolio management, if you want to, we give it a nice term, that process is so important. It's so important that process is inclusive, and the business folks that own the problems that need to be solved are at the table for those discussions. Don't surrender your future to an IT team that's going to come in and tell you, what you need and how to use it. And I think that the other sort of takeaway that I've heard here is, how do we make the business case? What's the business case for this investment? I think that there is so much, the process around prioritization is as much political as it is financial. Business cases are awesome, but man, when I was at Spirit, the VPs, the operational VPs, would not even come to the prioritization meetings. Why aren't you here? Because that blowhard, Barry Biffle, is going to take all the air out of the room, and he's going to get all the marketing projects he wants, regardless of what I say when I'm there. Why would I waste my time? Right? It's incumbent on the management team to not allow that to happen. Like the business case, you can almost make an argument for anything when you sit and put paper to it. I think that a collaborative, honest process around what we do next, what project is more important now versus later, there's no magic bullet to that. But again, like, make sure your organization has a seat at that table. Be proactive and aggressive in those conversations and argue for what you need. I'm sure that this is a room of amazing industry experience, and I would imagine that most of this is not new to you, and that a good deal of the pain of these stories resonates. Everyone's probably got their own versions of these things, but this is the hard work of applying technology to solve business problems. It tends to be a bit of a blood sport. It's messy. You have to engage, and it's an ongoing process. It's also, like, I find it thoroughly enjoyable, and in a way, it's what sets organizations apart. People that effectively, solve these issues are the ones that are able to innovate and move forward. I hope that what I want to do with this is, set the tone in this room for workshops that are honest, where people will come to the table and talk about the reality in their organizations, the challenges they're really having. This should be a safe space where we can do that and sort of work through these issues together during the next couple hours. Thank you for the time. I'm thrilled to be here with you, all of you, and I hope the morning is productive for everyone. Thank you.